Welcome to episode 126 of I Thought I Knew How, a podcast about knitting and life and all sorts. I'm your host, Anne Frost, and this episode was recorded on March 31st, 2025. It has been 4 months, and I am poking my head back out of my hole again to get caught up. I've been sitting on a handful of topics for the last several months now, so today will be a potpourri episode. Grab your knitting, let's do this. So yes, it has been 4 months. I fully expected to get at least one more episode out before disappearing last time, and it just was not meant to be. The craziness of my own holidays extends right up through New Year, so my week of weird timelessness that many people experience between Christmas and New Year's Day happens for me the week after New Year. And this year, that week was so sweet, so delectable, that I just leaned into it and had actual rest for a good 3 weeks. And as you can probably imagine, when I finally snapped out of it, it was right back into real life with the need to get caught up on things. The current semester is not over. There's another month to go, and I have another major assignment to get finished, but I have like 2 days where I can focus on other things before diving back in, so I'm taking advantage of this window to get an episode out. Speaking of my semester, thank you to those who helped with the online event, either by signing up for tickets or attending or both. If you signed up for tickets and weren't actually able to attend, no worries at all. That's actually the norm for an online event. We're told to plan for 40 to 50% attendance based on how many people signed up because the event was free and online, and we were smack dab at 40% attendance. But the coolest thing was that we had 50 attendees and the other groups topped out at 14. Now, it's not a contest. And my group definitely had an unfair advantage because so many of you were willing to help us out, but it was still pretty awesome, I'm not going to lie. So thank you again. I hope that if you were able to attend, you enjoyed it. We had a technical issue at the start, but it worked itself out, and the event is still on YouTube if you'd like to go back and hear the storytellers. I'll put a link in the show notes. Another thing that happened since we last spoke was that the Shetland lace definition of the word steek appeared in the Oxford English Dictionary. If you are new to the show or would like a refresher, I spoke about researching and submitting this word to the OED back in episode 113. A few weeks ago, I had the thought to see if the definition had actually been added, and sure enough, when I checked, it was there. The Shetland Times did a little article about its inclusion, and it reopened the quote-unquote controversy about this particular definition of the word. So I thought I'd quickly address a few points that came up again. The Shetland lace definition of steek is a line of openwork holes. It's often used to delineate different areas of lace or to separate the center of a project from the edging, or just for its own sake. But a knitter from outside of Shetland took the word steek and applied it to the columns of stitches that get cut in Fair Isle knitting. And fearing that people would think that steek just means the area of knitting that you cut, Shetland lace knitters stopped using it around visitors because they didn't want people to think that you have to cut Shetland lace knitting. You don't. Do not cut your lace. Ever. Don't do it. Steek was taken out of context and misapplied to Fair Isle knitting, and it's since taken hold outside of Shetland, but that doesn't mean that the longer-lived definition of the word should be abandoned. English has a lot of words that are the same and have different meanings. We can do this, y'all. To prove that the concerns of the local lace knitters were valid, though, a few people did comment on the social media post I made about the news article to say that they were surprised to hear that Shetland lace knitters cut their work. They don't. Please go back and listen to episode 113 or find my post on Instagram or Facebook, and you can zoom in and read the news article. I will put a link in the show notes. So that is one thing that needs to be addressed. Shetland lace knitters do not cut their knitting. A steek in lace is a line of openwork holes. Do not cut it. Second, I had so many people DM me and comment to tell me that Alice Starmore is the person who first appropriated the word to apply to the stitches added to Fair Isle knitting to be cut later. And I could not figure out why so many people were telling me that, because the OED has the first use in print occurring long before Starmore published her book about Fair Isle knitting. Helen Robertson is actually the one who pointed me to a Vogue Knitting podcast episode in which the Vogue Knitting editor interviewed Alice Starmore. And Starmore does make two claims in her interview that were not correct. One was that she was the first person to write a book solely about Fair Isle knitting. The other is that she is the one who chose to use the word Steek to refer to the bridge of stitches added to Fair Isle projects that you then cut open. She is wrong on both counts. The complete book of Fair Isle knitting by Sheila McGregor is the first book that I've been able to find that is dedicated to just Fair Isle knitting. Patterns have appeared in earlier books, but McGregor was the first to have a book just about Fair Isle knitting. And perhaps unsurprisingly, McGregor was the one who first misapplied the term steek to mean the bridge of stitches that you cut. This should not be taken as me calling Alice Starmore out or anything like that. Memory is a tricky thing. And at the time of the interview, her Fair Isle book was 30 years old. And that would be like asking me to recount my senior solo concert from high school. I have some clear images of the evening and the lead up for the preparation of the evening. And I could for sure remember 2 of the songs, but I know I sang 6 of them that night. And if you held my feet to the fire, I could probably come up with 2 or 3 other titles, but some of them might actually be songs that I sang in choir rather than at my solo performance. Our memories get cloudy over time. I will link to the interview, and you can listen for yourself. As I heard Starmore tell the story, I can imagine a case where Starmore was not aware of McGregor's book. And I can also imagine a case where the word Starmore was originally going to use was deemed too clunky. So either her editor suggested the already established word steek, or Starmore became aware of McGregor's book and saw that McGregor had already defined it and chose to use it instead. But McGregor misapplied the term years before Alice Starmore. She is the one who is responsible / to blame, depending on how you feel about it. And to be honest, at this point, it's an established word usage. It's not anything that people need to get upset about or angry about or worked up about. It's in the lexicon. Both meanings are in the lexicon. Both meanings are valid, and people should be able to use them in the way that they understand them. And we as knitters should be able to hold both meanings in our minds and know that if we are talking about a Fair Isle piece and someone talks about steeking or adding a steek, that they're talking about adding some columns of stitches to later cut. And we should know that if they are a lace knitter and they're talking about adding a steek or the steek, then we know that because they're talking about lace, they're talking about a column or a row of open work holes that will not be cut. Okay? Context matters. We can learn things. Both words can be used. What a bunch of bother, yeah? This is one of those little things that would not have been an issue had the original practitioners been empowered to write about their own craft rather than being written about. This is another reminder to seek out those folks who are part of the original continuum of knowledge and learn directly from the source. There's my soapbox. Shall we have a song? It feels like song break. This is Ben Bostic singing The Myth of Translation. I will see you on the other side.
If you say what you mean and I listen close, then I'll know what you mean. So the theory goes, but here in the real world, it don't that way. You claim I don't hear anything you say. The myth of translation says words can convey intentions and meaning from your heart to my brain. Miscommunication has plainly been framed. The myth of translation is clearly to blame. We feed our children all flavors of lies, sweet deceptions to mask the taste of life. We teach them to listen. We say, go speak your mind. They grow up and leave us, and we wonder why. Oh, the myth of translation says words can convey intentions and meaning from my heart to your brain. Miscommunication has plainly been framed. The myth of translation is clearly to blame. Out of Babel was worse than reported. The editors knew that we couldn't have borne it. When hearts draw near and wish to relate, precious messages are shared, but they do not translate. The myth of translation says words can convey intentions and meaning from my heart to your brain. Miscommunication has plainly been framed. The myth of translation is clearly to blame.
It is the end of March, which means the winter drought of wool festivals has ended and knitting and wool events are starting up again. My calendar is filling up for the year. I will be at Woolly Good in a few days. That's in Edinburgh, and both the Massachusetts and Connecticut Sheep and Wool festivals in May and April, respectively. I'm also looking forward to making it to New Hampshire Sheep and Wool for the first time this year. A month or 3 ago, something came up about protection from wool moths, and I had a not insignificant number of people reach out to tell me that they never had a problem with moths until they'd bought some yarn at a wool or knitting festival, and that yarn seemed to be the way that the infestation of their stash began. And this froze me in my tracks because these sorts of events have become one of my favorite places to acquire yarn in the last few years. But I realized in that moment just how many different places the yarn was coming from, and therefore the different ways it's being stored and protected, and it suddenly felt very risky to me. I'm sure that many of you have heard the debate about what to do to keep your stash safe from moths. I'll share what I've been doing first to keep moths from getting into it. So the main thing that I do is I keep all of my protein fibers behind a sealed cotton layer because wool moths aren't interested in cotton. So it's a very simple, easy way to keep away the moths that might come check out the area. And I know many people like to use lavender sachets or cedar. The main way that those things work is simply by masking the smell of wool. So if you have someone with an allergy in your household, like us, where one of my children has a lavender allergy, you can make up sachets using different herbs with strong smells. I use a blend of cloves, rosemary, and thyme. Now, any sachet or essential oil you try to use as a deterrent needs to be refreshed every 30 days or so because the oils dissipate. I will admit I am not perfect about this, but what that looks like for me with my sachets is that anytime I'm digging around in my stash, I'll give the sachet a good scrunch to break up the herbs inside and release more of the scent. And then every year as I do my yarn stash restash, I swap out the contents of the sachets for fresh stuff. So none of them are sewn shut. They're all tied shut so I can get into them and replace the contents. This sounds terribly expensive if you're buying supermarket-sized amounts of herbs, but you can buy them in bulk at a very reasonable rate. Rosemary's very easy to grow on your own. And if they haven't been ground, then they last quite a long time. So if you're interested in doing this, buy the spices whole and in bulk. Additionally, wool moths like the dark, so keeping yarn in well-lit places, keeping the area clean and vacuumed, and checking in on your stash at least once a year to identify and stop an infestation from spreading. All of these are good practices. Another thing I learned while I was double-checking my info for this episode was that when the mama moth is carrying eggs, she usually can't fly. So keeping your yarn up off the floor is another way to keep it safer. You could have it in truly airtight containers on the floor, but just storing it in baskets that are in contact with the floor is probably not the best idea unless you're including another barrier of some sort. So that's what I've been doing to keep the yarn that I already have safe from any wayward moths that might make an appearance in the house. But what do you do when you're bringing yarn into your home and you're not sure whether it was stored properly? So there's two ways you can go with this, and this is where the controversy lies because everyone seems to have their favorite method that they swear by. I'm just going to share what I found when I looked into it myself. You can choose to agree or disagree. Your yarn stash is your own. The first method that people like to tell me about is the freeze method, and the other is the baking method. The freeze method seems to be the most risky to me, and I know people who swear up and down by it, and all I can say is that maybe you have the right conditions for it to work, or maybe you've just not had moth-infested yarn. Either way, I'm glad it's working for you. This method involves putting your new yarn acquisition in the freezer for a certain amount of time. I've heard everything from overnight to a month. I've heard that you can just do it once. I've heard do it, take it out for a week, and then do it again. Again, everyone who does this seems to have the method that they swear by. So I decided to do some digging and see what I could find as far as journal articles or, things from university extension offices. And it turns out several university extension offices do have white papers about this. So the recommendations that I could find from actual scientists who have experimented are that for the freeze method, what you want to do is you want to get your wool to 70 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, so a fairly normal room temperature for many people, but you could throw it in an oven at its lowest setting if you want, and then immediately put it in a freezer, set to 0 degrees Fahrenheit and leave it for 72 hours. And that should kill everything. The abrupt change in temperature is part of the process. So don't skip that step of getting it to room temperature first. The problem with the freeze method is that while your freezer should be set to 0 degrees Fahrenheit anyway, it might not actually be functioning to that level of cooling. Things freeze at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So if your freezer is at 20 degrees, all your food will be frozen, but those moth larvae can still withstand cold that low. So if you are going to use the freeze method, it's worth investing in a freezer thermometer so you can make sure that your freezer is as cold as you need it to be. And then in that 72-hour period, don't open the freezer because the temperature fluctuation can also throw things off. The other method is the one I prefer, but it's really only suitable for 100% natural fibers. If you bought sock yarn with nylon in it or something with sparkle, you don't want to use this method because you can't be sure of the melting point of those additions. But this method is super easy. You just put your wool in the oven at 120 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. That's it. You might want to take the labels off just in case there's like a plastic or a wax element to them, but it really doesn't take that high of a heat to kill off wool moths. Whatever you decide to do, if you have seen evidence of concern or if you really want to be sure, you can do whichever system you prefer and then store the yarn in an airtight container for a month or two and then repeat it. Because with the life cycle of a typical wool moth, if anything did make it through, you should be able to kill it in that second time. Okay, keep those stashes safe, folks. I will link to the info sheets from the various university extension offices that I used to gather this information in the show notes in case you would like to read more or see images of the moths, the larvae, and examples of ways to tell that they're around without actually seeing the moths themselves. Okay, time for song 2. This is a new band for the show. They're called Sleeping Ghost, and this is Afro Summer. Enjoy. Y'all, I am 50-50 on the loss of Joann stores. And it's not 50-50 in the sense that I'm half happy and half sad. It's more that I'm half sad and half kind of like, well, that's how it goes with business sometimes. I know I'm behind the times commenting on this, but I will direct you to the start of the show for the whys of that. For those of you outside of North America or living under a rock, Joann is a big box craft store that had been around for something like 80 years in one form or another, but it declared bankruptcy for real last month, meaning they aren't just trying to fix things, they are closing down completely. I had been very nonchalant about the whole thing, really. In all honesty, the last time I went to a Joann store looking for something I needed, either for myself or for some volunteer work, would have been 3 years ago. So personally, the loss of Joann isn't going to affect me. I no longer homeschool or work with youth groups or teach full-time. I was not impressed with how nuts their discount and coupon system had gotten, so it wasn't working as an incentive for me because I'd been burned enough times going in to get something specific with a coupon only to find out it was exempted for some reason. I don't sew, I have enough holiday decor, and while I enjoy beading and cross-stitch, I do very little of it these days, and I have reasonable amounts of supplies to do either when I want to. And that's mainly from the years when Joann was doing things right and luring me into their stores. Where I live now, I have local yarn stores selling the good stuff, and there are other big box craft stores selling things I might need, and frankly, I'm experienced enough with the craft supplies and equipment that I use that I don't mind ordering them online when I know I can't get it locally. And I'm not alone in that. Last year, 15% of all retail purchases in the United States were made online. That might seem like not so much, but those retail purchases include food, like your groceries and snacks on the go, which represents a huge number of those purchases and are still mostly done in person, so they skew the results quite a bit. Only 45% of people only shop in person, and the rest of us are nearly evenly split between shopping both in person and online or solely online. And retailers are trying to figure out how to manage that. Joann isn't the first big box store to collapse in this new shopping age. Toys R Us, Circuit City, Bed Bath & Beyond, Borders, all gone. They weren't able to find a unique value proposition that brought people to their stores and websites rather than to their competitors. Best Buy, a competitor of Circuit City, continued to exist as a physical store for over 15 years after Circuit City closed, but they are struggling now. Likewise, Barnes & Noble has lasted 15 years longer than Borders so far in the face of the Amazon juggernaut, but they started the year announcing the closure of 34 stores as well. I'm sure Michaels and Hobby Lobby are both breathing a sigh of relief that they outlasted Joann. It will likely buy the both of them another 5 to 10 years at least, but the trend is against them. The craft market is currently saturated, and one of them was going to go. I went to my local Joann last evening, and it was less than a mile from a Michaels. In fact, checking the map of Joann stores around me, every single one of them has a Michaels location within a mile or two. A lot of Joann customers are just going to switch over to them. And hopefully, a lot of big box shoppers are going to do some Googling and find the local yarn stores, the fabric stores, the art supply stores in their area and give them a go. All the remaining retailers should benefit from the collapse of Joann for a time. And I say this too, recognizing that there is a small segment of the American population who only had access to affordable craft supplies in their area through a Joann store. And now that they are gone, your only choices are online or nothing. I do hear that, and that really is a blow. There's no getting around that. But for most of the areas covered by a Joann store, there are other competing stores in the area. That is one of the problems that led to their demise. But even with the fact that Joann had a lot of direct competition in the physical retail market, shops are also competing with the world these days. You likely would not stand in your local yarn store and Google to see if you could get monos de Uruguay from an online retailer for less because the yarn store owner would be right there watching you do it. But if you're standing in an aisle of a huge shop with 2 employees on duty, you would be more likely to whip out your phone and see if a competitor in the area or online was having a sale. Honestly, Joann was doing a lot wrong. In my neck of the woods anyway, they had cut staffing numbers in their stores to such a degree that the stores were often in a state, and I'd be stuck waiting at the register for 5 or 10 minutes sometimes because the only staff in the store were busy elsewhere. I'd already mentioned their complicated discount system that often wasn't a discount at all. They hadn't offered classes or community gatherings in ages, and while they tried to bring natural fibers back into the store in earnest in the last year or so, I think it was too little too late. They already had too much of a reputation for being acrylic and kitchen cotton. But even though Joann wasn't doing it for me anymore, I know they're going to leave a big hole for a lot of people. Everywhere I've lived, Joann has been close to competing stores, but that's just been my experience. There are parts of the country where it was their only craft store, period. And it was still an active place for local shoppers. I know for my daughter, Joann is a mixed bag, as they had dropped so much of their clothing appropriate fabric, but what they did still have was affordable for her to use as a student, having to do multiple designs in a semester. I get it, but as I walked around the store last evening, I saw all of the negatives of Joann laid out in front of me. The holiday decor section was still packed with goods from Christmas through Easter, all of it stuff that you maybe display for a month in your home and then you have to either store it or get rid of it through donation or throwing it away. It's all just churn. And then looking at the pricing for a lot of the goods, the website and window signs declared up to 60% off, up to 50% off, but it wasn't on anything anyone actually wanted. Yes, Christmas decor was 60% off, but go to Joann in January and it would have been 85% off. Sewing machines and aught lights were 15% off. Yarn was 25% off, and Michael's had equivalent yarn for 30% off. So why buy from this store that is meant to be liquidating when I could drive a mile and buy the equivalent items and earn points in their reward system? So the shelves were packed with acrylic yarn, and all the natural stuff was gone. Over in fabrics, the shelves were still full, but it was almost all polar fleece. I remember shopping in Joann with my mom. I remember being a young mom and clipping their coupons to get supplies to make things for my kids. I have bought who knows how many lists of supplies for craft projects with kids in my classroom and community. I have very fond memories of shopping at Joann, and I was surprised to find myself getting a little choked up last evening as I walked through the store. Will I miss Joann? Yeah, but almost entirely for nostalgic reasons, and you can't run a business on nostalgia. One more song before we close the show, a final song from Ben Bostic. This is Sweet Thursday.
Wasn't supposed to go this way. When I met you yesterday, I didn't need you next to me. Am I the kind that you expected me to be? It's getting a little warm. Crack the window, please. I'll pump the gas if you run inside. Grab a couple tall boys and a honey pie. And yesterday is far away, and tomorrow you'll be gone. It wasn't supposed to go this way. Sweet, sweet, sweet sweet Thursday. 10 million people, and maybe more, out on the highway in a dusty storm. 2 lonesome losers in a stolen dream, headed straight for nowhere in a suicide machine. If you see the lights flashing, push the pedal down. Over the border, they can't get us there. Between the 2 of us, we'll make it if we share. And yesterday is far away, and tomorrow you'll be gone. It wasn't supposed to go this way. Sweet, 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 sweet Thursday.
A few more things before I go. The Shetland Hogmanay boxes are in the final planning stages. I will be opening the pre-order for these sometime in April, likely toward the end of the month. For those who may be new listeners, the Shetland Hogmanay box is a Advent-style mystery yarn box with both yarn and gifts from Shetland wool producers and others working in Shetland. If you are lucky enough to get one of these boxes, each day of December you will open one of the packages in the box, and it will be either yarn or a gift or a pattern designed to use the yarn in the box. This year our designer is Mandy Moore, who is a Shetland designer and knitting tutor who you've heard me mention on the show before. She is designing a Fair Isle item for the home. This year, in addition to the 25-gram balls of fingering weight yarn from Uredale Yarns, Laxdale Yarn, Aister Ooh, Jameson's of Shetland, and the Silly Sheep, the box will also contain yarn from Westland Wool and a final 100-gram hank of long-sewn yarn by Donna Smith. Also this year, the inclusions in the box will be built around the theme of a night in with your knitting. There will be a recipe for a no-bake dessert that you can make on your stovetop and a few other items to help set the mood for your cast on. More information about pricing and launch day will be coming soon. I recommend following I Thought I Knew How on Instagram or follow the I Thought I Knew How page on Facebook. The best way to keep up to date, though, would be to join the mailing list, which you can find by visiting IThoughtIKnewHow.com and just scroll down a little bit and you'll see the field to join. I am headed to the Woolly Good Gathering tomorrow. The gathering is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, if you're listening to this right away. Tickets are pretty much gone, though some might become available if people have to change their plans last minute. So if you were really hoping to go, do keep your eye on their ticketing page. If you are going, I will be volunteering in 4 different areas of the event on Friday and Saturday, as the organizers have been good enough to let me use their event as a hands-on learning experience. So do say hi if you see me. But if I have to run off quickly, please understand, because I'm working. I really am intending to be back in a few weeks to update you on my time at Woolly Good and some other goings on, and I'll have all the details for the Shetland Hogmanay box at that point. Cross your fingers for me, stay well, and in the meantime, thank you for listening and knitting with me for a bit. If you enjoy the show, please rate and review the show in the app you use to download it, and I would love it if you would share the episode with a friend. The show notes are where you will find links to the things mentioned in the show, so be sure to check those out. Find me on my social media accounts as I Thought I Knew How. The groups on various platforms are all called I Thought I Knew How Podcast. Until next time, may you be blessed with stitches that never drop, yarn without joins, and plenty of time to knit.